The following is a presentation of Moonlight Media Works. Welcome in to another edition of the Collins Janus Show. We appreciate each and every one of you that tunes in each and every week. We are actually recording this starting at Thursday, which is only going to be Thursday for about 2 more minutes. This is a late night recording of the Collins Janus Show as we roll into Friday when you guys will get this episode. And a lot has happened since the last time we spoke. Quite possibly one of the greatest buzzer beaters in the history of college basketball happened last Sunday night. Braylon Mullins etched his name into the history books, the annals of UConn basketball, the history of college basketball, one of the greatest final buzzer beaters to ever win a tournament game. So I've actually, to do full due diligence here, I was watching that game at work. I had to work Sunday night, and I was glued to that TV when I could be. And I completely stopped for like a minute or two once that final sequence had happened, because to summarize that game, Duke was eating UConn's lunch for majority of that game. And I admit, I saw them come out flat. I saw them unable to hit from three. I thought, dear God, this is every worst case scenario playing out for the Huskies in this game. I mean, the Boozer brothers were going crazy. We'll get to Caden in a minute. But you know, it was crazy just to see that game unfold, because in the second half, it was a night and day performance. And I'm here to make a declaration. In my bracket, I had struggled for a long time with that game. Part of me wanted to use the old reverse psychology thing. Some people think this is the dumbest thing on earth, but it's a sports fan thought. So guess what? This is what happens. To not pick, to pick UConn over Duke and, try to get the benefit of the whole reverse side. Well, I didn't pick them, but then they win. So, it's one of those things that you're afraid you're going to jinx your favorite team in the tournament. And I have a declaration to make. I picked Michigan in my bracket when we did this. I still believe they're going to probably get to the championship game, but I am going to say this. After that win, I will refuse to ever doubt Danny Hurley again. As far as I'm concerned, I won't do it. I won't pick against Danny Hurley again. And as a UConn fan, I should know better. But I panicked. And you saw in the video how long I sat there and belabored the point. But I won't do it again. And from here on out, I'm changing my pick. I think UConn wins this whole thing. They had to get there. They don't lose when they get this far in a tournament. UConn as a program does not lose when they get this far into a tournament. I mean, the first couple years under Dan Hurley in 23-24, it was so easy to pick UConn. And then you have that stumble last year against the future national champion in Florida. They lose by 2 in a game was an absolute slugfest. And I don't know why, but I let the worst case scenario scare me off of UConn this year, because this is a team that turns the ball over. They do go cold for long periods of time shooting, but guys like Taurus Reed, guys like Alex Caravan, they refuse to quit. They refuse to lose. I mean, Silas Demery's getting points in there. Braylon Mullins hits the shot of his life. I mean, first of all, if I'm trying to rank that of all time, I don't think it can surpass a shot that won a national title. So your Lorenzo Charles dunk at the end, or, you can go to the Chris Jenkins buzzer beater for Villanova, So I think it's probably in the top 3 or 4 greatest buzzer beaters in the history of the tournament. So I'll give a couple nods to the ones that won national titles. You get the Christian Laettner one in there as well. I mean, it is very evident that is one of the greatest wins in UConn men's basketball history. And I say that full knowing they've won a lot of national titles, including their first one against Duke. But what makes this one so significant is over the last couple of years in the tournament, what makes this one so significant is UConn usually rolls teams under Dan Hurley. To come back in the manner of which they did, they were getting pummeled at one point. I mean, I think that lead was as many as 19 or 20 at one point in the first half. And that's just not something you see happen to a Duke team. I may not like Duke as a person. I may have been raised to never like Duke. But you don't come back from margins like that unless you are a really special team with a really special head coach, and that's Dan Hurley. He's the best college basketball coach in the game today, bar none. Nobody's even remotely close to second. I mean, there's a lot of really good coaches, but he's here. Everybody else is here. It's just the way it is. There's a reason why the Los Angeles Lakers were willing to throw a lot of money to try to, get his services in LA. And I'm so glad, forever grateful, as born in Connecticut, raised in New England sports fans outside of the Carolina Hurricanes, as the aforementioned team I'm wearing on my hat, for them to stymie the Los Angeles Lakers, the pinnacle of, prim and proper and snobby LA with all their half Luke-hearted fans and their just pretentious attitude to sports and their show and glitz and glam, to see hard-nosed, fundamental, defensive, tough-minded, strangle you basketball win out at UConn, and Dan Hurley say no to the Lakers and Showtime and all the, the fake glitz and glam of LA. It was so rewarding as a fan. It was the greatest feeling I've ever had from a coach snubbing a team. And, with the exception of maybe Pat Kelsey snubbing UMass to come back to Winthrop, that might be the only one that rivals it, really, for me. And that's the other part I should bring up, because I've outlined it, but for those that aren't listening, it's very simple. I can break my entire college fandom down to 3 simple breakdowns. Number 1, and above all else, I am a Winthrop Eagle. That's what my diploma over there says. That's where I went to school for 4 years, where I graduated, where my heart and home is as a college student for 4 years was at Winthrop University in Rock Hill, South Carolina. That will never change. Growing up as a young fan, my grandfather played football at East Carolina. My grandmother cheered at East Carolina. I have been an East Carolina football fan since I was not even tall enough to show up on camera here. My mother went to Carolina for, her schooling. My dad went to an engineering school in Massachusetts. His parents are diehard, devout UConn Huskies fans, mostly for the women's side. My grandmother is the most devout women's basketball fan you will ever find, and I love her, and she always sends me things about her, about the team, and how she still, bemoans her Connecticut Sun from all those years of watching the Connecticut Sun WNBA team. And they just got moved to Texas. I don't even know what we're doing anymore. I mean, it's maddening enough that the tribe felt the need to sell it out of Connecticut, but at least keeping it in New England would have made sense. But for whatever reason, they couldn't sell to a Boston-based company or anybody like that, so they just moved the team out of the state and out of the region, which is just stupid, especially considering how devout the women's basketball fans are in Connecticut. But there's no secret about it. I was born in Connecticut. I did not spend a majority of my life in Connecticut. I did not spend hardly any of my life in the actual state of Connecticut. I was born in Connecticut. I moved at a very young age to North Carolina. Not long after the Hurricanes moved down themselves, I moved right behind them. It was a matter of, that's where the family had a job. That's where we had to go. And I have been a resident between North or South Carolina for the large majority of my life. But my love of that part of the world has never wavered. I will go out of my way to bring up that I was born in Connecticut. I love Connecticut with all my heart. I really do. It's not perfect by any measure. There's a lot of things that you could nitpick about that state that are valid. But I love being from Connecticut. I love growing up watching the UConn Huskies, whether it was Kemba Walker and Hasheem Thabeet, or it was Shabazz Napier, Ryan Boatwright. You can go down the list, Jeremy Lamb, all these guys I grew up watching. Jalen Adams, you can go through Ryan Bouknight, or James Bouknight. And Jim Calhoun, growing up, was my favorite college basketball coach, still is. Danny Hurley's making one hell of a run at that. But as a kid, I loved watching UConn basketball. And it has never wavered. It has never changed. Since I first got into college basketball, I loved UConn. When I was a baby, I was born in August of 98. By March of 99, UConn defeated Duke for its first ever national title. As a baby, there is and I still have it somewhere in my parents' house. It is a miniature baby 1998-99 UConn Huskies men's national title t-shirt. From the from out of the womb to into the crib, I was a UConn Husky fan. I was born when that program ascended, and they have not left. There have been peaks and valleys during that time, but there is no doubt to me that the Huskies have proven themselves above a shadow of a doubt to be one of the greatest basketball programs in the history of college basketball. And if you had any doubt that the game of college basketball runs through Storrs, Connecticut, the fact that there is only one program in both the men's and women's Final Four tells you all you need to know. And Gino Auriemma ain't going to play for second, and neither is Dan Hurley. So hats off where it goes. What an incredible game. I lost my ever-loving mind watching that finish, and it made me feel so much better that it was Duke. It just, you know what? And I saw a lot of Duke people go, why is it that everybody gets upset when we lose or gets so happy when we lose in our misery? It's like, we love your misery. We love your misery. I wish I could drink your tears. Oh, I love it. I love it so much. I want you to be weeping miserable because your fan base is made up of people that have no bearing on Duke basketball, didn't go to Duke. And I'm not saying you have to go to the school, but I mean, there are more casual, non-North Carolina, any background in Duke. The classic Lakers, Cowboys, Yankees, Duke fan. I mean, we all know somebody who does it. Or even worse, when they're a Clemson or Clemson football, Duke basketball. That might be the most sickening, nauseating, vomit-inducing combination I have ever heard of. I mean, it is just pitiful. I mean, look, you can root for whatever you want, but I'm still going to, I can still go, bleh, if I want to. It's my opinion. Everybody, their opinions are like assholes. Everyone's got one and they all stink. I mean, that's just the way it is. But the reality of it is that game really, it's my opinion. That's the way it is. So there you go. Now it's a Final Four we can break down. We've got Illinois, Connecticut, and on the other side, we've got Michigan, Arizona. You got 2 1 seeds, a 3 and a 2. The Huskies get the higher seed on one side of the bracket, and then you have Michigan and Arizona, the 2 1s coming out of the other side. UConn, Illinois is interesting. Mainly because I just didn't anticipate Illinois getting this far. Now, a couple years ago, I could definitely have seen this run. And we saw what happened the last time UConn and Illinois locked up. It was one of the most lopsided second halves of a college basketball NCAA tournament game you're ever going to see. I don't think it'll be that bad. I think, again, my concerns with the Huskies are still real. Like, they did play an absolute awful first half. I mean, 1 of 18 for 3 to start a game is just absolutely atrocious. And you're not going to get bailed out by that performance the other night every time. So it has to be better to start, or Illinois will take advantage, and Illinois can win this ball game. I still think UConn wins, but I'm putting a lot of faith in the actual roster to get things done. They cannot turn the ball over, and they cannot go through shooting slumps like that. If you have to go download a Taurus Reed and absolutely bully him off the ball, then that's what you have to do. But if you go 1 for 18 again from 3 to start a ball game, you ain't winning. It's just that simple. It's not going to happen. On the other side, this is a real heavyweight fight. I mean, Arizona has looked to be the best team in the tournament for much of this tournament, but then Michigan will turn around and thump another team on the head. I mean, I said they were the best team entering this tournament. They were the best team in the regular season all year long. I don't know if that opinion has changed. I just trust UConn more in these situations than I do Dusty May at the moment, but that's not really fair, and that's not really an indictment of Dusty May. It's that I got one coach here with 2 national titles and an incredible tournament resume since he's been at UConn, and you're going to be fighting an absolute war to beat Arizona if you get there. So, I mean, this is going to be cinema. If you want to watch a game, you cannot miss Arizona and Michigan. I mean, this is going to be a lot of fun. And whoever gets out of that game and whoever gets out of the other game, it is going to be a heavyweight fight for the title. And I have to say, these games have delivered. I mean, the ratings are through the roof this year for March Madness, and I have to say that is a bit surprising because there wasn't a true Cinderella underdog. Not as bad as what we saw last year, because we saw some deeper seeds come through, but Texas isn't a Cinderella. There are a lot of programs like that got a low seed that probably don't deserve to be as lowly seeded as they were, but they're not Cinderella. That's a Fairleigh Dickinson is Cinderella. You know, you can go down the list and name the teams that are like your Cinderella stories that go into it. But reality speaking, there wasn't, and yet the games themselves made up for that. Like, there were a lot of really competitive matchups. There's an occasional stinkeroo in the mix. And look, that's the price of doing business. If you're trying to sit here and match make all these games so you don't have that, then you're in the wrong business. Because sports is not TV. Sports is not movies. It is competitive athletics going head to head. I mean, it is two teams trying to beat the other team, and they are trying to do it at all cost. I mean, that's just the way it is. Competitors on a court trying to settle something. That's all sports should ever be. So it'll be a very interesting Final Four. By the way, if you haven't noticed, I got this shirt in the mail the other day as a fan of the original Beastie Boys album, Licensed to Ill, that came out on Def Jam Records, which was Rick Rubin's label. I just love this shirt, and I got it. So if you've noticed, I've been trying to get it on camera, but for whatever reason, when you're 6'3", sometimes it doesn't always show up. It's just one of those things that amuses me. Hats and certain T-shirts. I love to collect unique stuff. And I'm wearing this hat to remind you that the Carolina Hurricanes have clinched a playoff spot for the 8th consecutive season. And let me take a moment, because I know a lot of you are out there watching just don't understand what it means for the Hurricanes to have made the playoffs 8 straight seasons. You have to go back to a time before Rod Brindamore was anything other than a player. You have to go back before Tom Dundon owned the Hurricanes. You have to go back to the years immediately following the Carolina Hurricanes winning the Stanley Cup in 2006. That was a core childhood memory for a young Collins Janus. Watching that team win, growing up outside of Raleigh, North Carolina, going to Hurricanes games is the first sporting event I ever went to. It's the first team I ever loved, truly. There was so much love and goodwill built up from a cup run in 2002 and an actual championship 2006 in such a short period of time, with legends like Rod Brindamore, Cam Ward, Eric Stahl, Ray Whitney, Eric Cole, Justin Williams, Brett Hedican, Glenn Wesley, all these guys that came through the doors in Carolinas. And then there's the period after, because there's one more playoff run that ends in 2009 when they play against the Penguins in the Eastern Conference Finals. They get rolled out of that thing. The Eastern Conference Finals goes to the Penguins. Penguins go on to win the Cup. Then there's a long period of just mediocrity. And mediocrity might even be kind. There were years and years of rebranding the image of the team and trying to do all these things and changing the jerseys and just giving some of the worst looks of all time. And it comes up with a topic later on, but one of those awful rebrands that the Hurricanes did during their period of time, jersey-wise, it makes my eyes bleed to see it to this day, because I love the Hurricanes, and for them to have ruined a classic look and ruin all the goodwill they had, it was just a miserable time, and I never stopped. I mean, I ended up watching other teams in the playoffs for years because I just love hockey, but God knows I never stopped watching. I mean, watching one of my broadcasting heroes, John Forsland, call the Hurricanes for so many seasons on Fox Sports Carolinas with Trip Tracy, Mike Maniscalco, the entire crew there, all the people that came through the door that were on those broadcasts, were a part of those teams over the years to come. And I loved the Hurricanes, and it pained me so much for them to be as bad as they were for as long as they were. So when Rod Brindamore gets hired to be the next head coach of the Carolina Hurricanes, Ron Francis, the GM, gone. He was done building for next year. We heard that forever. We're building for the future. We're building for the future, a future that was never coming. They finally get the right pieces in place. It took Don Waddell pairing up with Rod Brindamore to spearhead a movement that has seen the Carolina Hurricanes make the playoffs 8 straight seasons. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that the performances in all those postseasons has made me happy, because I'm a sports fan and I want more. And I've seen this team win a Stanley Cup in my lifetime. So getting there was a revelation, and it brought many good years of goodwill. Being like, you know what, guys, I'm glad y'all are here. Great. It doesn't matter if you win the cup. And that window has come and gone. Now it's time to be like, okay, playing with your food or getting out-bullied off the puck by a more physical team in the postseason, that can't happen anymore. And it's not going to change my opinion of Rod as a coach. It just means you have to get the combination right. And there's a real, genuine opportunity this season for the Hurricanes, because the thorn in the Hurricanes' side for the last several seasons has been the Florida Panthers, team that has won the Stanley Cup in back-to-back seasons. So they have dominated the Eastern Conference since then, and they've been a thorn in the Hurricanes' side. That's not a problem. The Rangers are out of the equation. That was another team that gave problems to the Hurricanes. The Bruins are, a side factor in this equation. That was another team a couple years ago that gave the Hurricanes problems. There is an opening. Tampa Bay is the only one that's still floating around that really, truly scares me in the Eastern Conference. And even then, it's because of Andrei Vasilevsky and not as much the entire roster. The goaltending has been the ultimate mountain for the Hurricanes to overcome. As you hear the dog deciding to come here, you. Come here. You want me to scratch you? Here, I'll scratch you. You're scratching yourself, jingling away like you're Santa Claus coming to town. That's been the challenge, is getting goal scoring late in the postseason, especially beyond the Eastern Conference Finals. Like, you've gotten there. You have gotten to that point. Now's the time to ascend to the cup. I mean, the Western Conference is another mess and a joke, but the Eastern Conference is still pretty deep. And it's going to be a challenge. And I believe this is still an opportunity where the Hurricanes can make a push. The problem has been the goaltending for them as well. This year it's been reliant a lot on Brandon Bussi, and I have to tell you, he's been a revelation, but even then, he's been asked to do an awful lot this season, and that's what's concerning. I think their production offensively is there. Defensively, they're still strong. It's going to matter if the combination of Brandon Bussi and whether Freddie Anderson can do the job here late in the postseason without crumbling to bits at any point. Like, that's always a concern. And it's one of those things that scares me about this team. I still believe this is the best chance you're going to get as far as the teams around you are concerning. So if you've got one run in you to get it done, now might be the now or never kind of situation. So I'm very excited, but I'm very cautiously optimistic as well. But thank God for 8 years. We're out of the dark ages of Hurricanes fandom, where you're paying $25, $30 to park to watch a team that won't even finish 10th in the Eastern Conference. Thank God we're past those days. Stadium renovations are moving along over at Lenovo Center. Some people like it, some people don't. It's a sign of the times. It's a sign of success. There's a lot of positives of success, and there's also the raising of concession prices and all those other things when you get successful and all the Johnny-come-latelys come around to watch hockey. It doesn't change anything for a diehard like myself, but I'm glad to see this team doing well. That's the overall point I'm trying to make. I want to go on to a topic that I kind of alluded to there, though, with regards to branding when it comes to modern age. We see a lot of minimalism, and this came up this week with regards to a couple of NFL teams altering their jerseys. I know the Falcons dropped a new jersey look this week. We've already seen the Titans go ahead and do some things. Both of those came out really well. I'm not critiquing those. I think the big thing to me is I looked at, and I think the post came up from one of those like sports jersey, Twitter accounts that always updates about some of the best and worst looks. The Minnesota Twins really got my ire going with their rebrand a couple years ago. And it hasn't fully set in until I was just looking at that picture the other day, coupled with the fact that the Florida Marlins, the Miami Marlins, whatever you choose to identify them as, decided to go ahead and unveil that they're going to have the classic 90s teal look come back for, I believe, Sunday games this year. And how beautiful, perfect that was. I mean, the Florida Marlins, the original Florida Marlins uniforms from those first two championship eras is so perfect. The fact they would ever rebrand and ruin that stuff is just disappointing. And it speaks to a larger issue I have with some of the rebrandings, whether it be, the minimalist ideas or just corporate ideas of creating something more appealing to a mass audience. And I've pulled up 10 here that just finally have irked me in ways that I wanted to list. And there's probably more. There's some honorable mentions. There's an honorable mentions category I want to get out of the way before I break down this list. And it's not in order. This is just how it came to me, how much it pissed me off when I was thinking about it. And I probably have one more than I needed to share because I added it in just as I was talking about it. But we'll start first with the honorable mentions category, which is just the same company, same logos and stuff, but changing the name slightly enough to annoy people. Like Dunkin' Donuts deciding to be Dunkin' is stupid. We all still call it Dunkin' Donuts. I mean, I get why you just... I know. I take that back. I was just about to justify it. I'm not going to do it. It's stupid. It's stupid. Don't change the name. Dunkin' Donuts. What do you have? Donuts. I know they were like, well, we want to be a coffee company. I get it. You get the coffee, do your thing, but don't... Donuts is what we love you for. Not everybody loves Dunkin' Donuts. I enjoy Dunkin' Donuts. I don't drink coffee. I eat donuts. Trust me, I look like it. I don't know why I did that. It's not like you're going to see it in my head. Maybe, I'm not going to do that. HBO Max, HBO whatever, like the fact that they've changed the name 16 different times between those two is utterly ridiculous. And then one that always bothered me, and I don't know if they even acknowledge it anymore because they do so much Gatorade branding now, but a couple years ago, the idea that we insisted upon Gatorade just being G, the letter G, I'm like, I understand, and I'm not dumb enough to be like, well, I understand what that is. You didn't change anything really, but you insisted on dropping the naming of it. But now it seems that has moved on. And some of these on this list have. But what I wanted to do with this list is kind of recognize just some grand failures at the highest level. And if I'm ranking this, there's no real order to it. But there's a couple of brands that changed names that I took issue with. But most of these are sports teams because those bother me the most. And if I had more time, I probably would have updated this, and I may even add to it. And if you want to add your list, that's a good homework assignment. You guys want to do some homework? In the comments, whether it's on YouTube, on Spotify, however you want to comment, give me your list of the worst rebrands of all time. Mostly this consists of image, name, branding, as far as, and it can have changed back. They could have righted some wrongs. They could have gone old Coke, new Coke, back to old Coke, and fixed everything. And a couple of these have, but a couple of them haven't. So if you got one you want to chime in with, let me know in the comments section below. I'm one of those guys now. See, comment section down there? Go ahead, drop some. Again, we're not doing this in order, but this isn't the one that pissed me off the most, and it pissed off so many people, they spun a 180 so quick. Cracker Barrel with that awful rebrand. I mean, and this is the body is barely cold on this whole story. So the fact that they made a quick U-turn, snap judgment, I mean, so quick you almost break your neck to fix that and right that wrong. That's just a brand that's somebody at the higher up at corporate going, I think we could attract more people if we do this. And that's somebody that doesn't know jack shit about Cracker Barrel. That's pretty much as simple as it is. Go into a Cracker Barrel, look around, go in the general store there, get you a licorice stick or whatever, get, a Stewart's orange soda, go get a peanut butter cluster or whatever the hell they got, go buy an old plate with a chicken on it, go pick up one of those puzzles that they have over by the toy section. Just do something and tell me that logo. This one, I'm going to point to it and it'll be put in post right here. No. The Miami Marlins, we mentioned this. Going away from the classic teal and black, to me, was always a mistake. And there are a couple of variations of that look. But whatever on God's green earth possessed them to do the last two brandings they did, whether it was when they first went to the Miami Marlins, which is dumb, they should just have been the Florida Marlins. I understand Tampa's in the state, but I like the name. It just rolled off the tongue better. The Florida Marlins versus the Miami Marlins. I'm like, just, it sounds like a cartoon. And they look like a cartoon. They had that cartoony sculpture thing out in center field. I mean, they had colors and bright and pretty, and like, you lose all charm to me. And then they tried again, and they got closer, but no cigar. It's still messy. And when you have a classic throwback, this is a word to all sports franchises. You think doing this minimalist shit is what we want. What we really want is just the throwback classic looks. The stuff from the 80s, the 90s, the 70s, depending on your team's greatest era, that's what we want. We don't want your, minimal design with taking all the charm out of a logo or a uniform or changing for the sake of changing. So, this is one of life's greatest phrases. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Speaking of another situation of ain't broke, don't fix it, the Minnesota Twins, the impetus behind this very list. I thought I could talk myself into what they currently have as a look, but they just abandoned all the goodness of what a Minnesota Twins uniform should look like. All the branding. They changed the logo. They changed some of the branding on the jersey. They took away parts. It's just, this list isn't very analytical. I'm not going to sit here and go, well, if they had just done this minor change here or that, I'm not going to do it. This is just a vent. Don't look for any hard-hitting analysis here, folks. Not in this list. That one bothers me in a great deal. And again, changing for the sake of changing, which also follows up with the middle period Tennessee Titans. I love the classic Titans look when they moved. First of all, the Oilers is one of the greatest jerseys of all time. I understand you can't do that. There's no oil in Tennessee. Not their way it was in Houston. So you can't be, and I know they did the Tennessee Oilers thing for like 5 minutes, but I get it. Titans is fine. The logo was fine. And I have to admit, what they did recently still looks very good, and I can get behind that. But I don't think it ever needed to change from this look with Chris Johnson, Lendell White, Vince Young, Kerry Collins, Nate Washington. You can go down the list of guys that played in those classic Titans. Those were tough teams. You can go back to Eddie George. You can go back to all sorts of players. Those were great. Steve McNair, the late, great Steve McNair. You can pull names up and down Titans franchise lists, and it starts a downward trend. Now, fortunately, they had Mike Vrabel in there, who's just the best, and he could get wins out of those ugly jerseys. But when they rebranded in the middle 2010s there, it was just so atrocious. And it pairs up with the other worst look in their own division, matched up with the rebranded Jacksonville Jaguars of the 2010s. What on God's green earth are we doing here? First of all, it's a tough color palette to work with anyways. But the David Garrard, Maurice Jones-Drew, Fred Taylor Jacksonville Jaguars was a solid look. Mark Brunell. You could go all the way down since their expansion era when they beat the Broncos in the wild card game. That's a classic look. Byron Leftwich was there. You got all these players you could rattle off, and it invokes a really endearing time. And I can't say any other Jaguars look has ever brought that out of me. Now they've kind of again tried to rectify it. One of the worst looking helmets in the history of the NFL. That thing, whatever the hell this thing is just atrocious. And it's also indicative of a team that was like, Blake Bortles is our franchise quarterback. This is going to be awesome. They had some killer defenses, and they got close, ran into a Patriots dynasty. They kept them out of the Super Bowl. And Stephon Gilmore actually retired today from the NFL. He made one of the greatest plays to seal that AFC Championship game over Jacksonville with that pass deflection on 4th down. So, tip of the cap to Stephon Gilmore. Wow, you can see how bad my hair looks right now. I literally came back from work and I'm doing this podcast at 12:30. I do it for you, people. I do it for you. I do it for me, but I do it for you too. So that's just a disappointing look all around. The Utah Jazz going to that yellow branding thing they did a couple years ago. Again, righted the wrong. They look great. Everything's really good there now. Don't need to belabor that point. Couple others here to round out this list. The Washington football team. Look, I understand, and I'm not going to go down the path of fighting whether or not it needed to be name changed or not. They went down that path. My issue with the Washington Commanders rebrand and everything is, to me, it felt so slapdash and half-ass. To be called the Washington football team for as long as they were called the Washington football team is just a joke. I don't like when other sports pretend to be another sport. When you're a football team, I don't like to pretend to be a soccer team. That's exactly what you're trying to evoke. Like you're not Liverpool FC, dude. Calm down. You're not. I know that people are going to be like Manchester, Liverpool. They're going to be like that in the. I don't care. I don't follow it enough. I watch a little bit of MLS. I watch the Olympics. I'll watch some of the World Cup. Whatever. I don't really. I can't do the foreign soccer thing. I can't go. I'm not getting up to watch Leicester play Manchester City or whatever team Mbappe plays for. Or what I'm not going to do Real Madrid versus FC Barcelona or what. I'm not doing it. There's billions of people on Earth. The game of soccer is for you, I guess. It's not for me. I played it as a kid. I watch it for Charlotte FC. That's about it. I'm not going to sit here and break down. I had a friend chime in with one of the Leeds rebrandings from years ago that they had a protest about and everybody hated. I'll take your word for it. You can look it up. I mean, it looked dumb, but I can't get up in arms over something like that. I can't even pretend to get up in arms. It just wouldn't look right. It would look wrong coming out of my face to be like, I can't do it. What are you doing? And then wrapping up this list, there's a couple left here. Whatever the hell this Jaguar rebrand was, and this is the car company Jaguar. Jaguar's a Jag, as Jeremy Clarkson would say, Jag. It's a unique brand. A unique brand of car. It has its own legacy, and if you know, you know. But whatever on God's green earth, I wish there was a Grand Tour Top Gear to have broken down whatever in God's name this thing was and whatever the hell they thought they were doing with this branding. Twitter to X is just one of those things I refuse to, concede to. Like, I don't care that it's named that way as much, but nobody I know calls X or Twitter X. And it's nothing. This is not a grand political statement about Elon or anything like that. It's just simple. I still type in twitter.com if I have to use it on my computer to get to it. I don't type in X. I mean, it doesn't really bother me. It wouldn't even really bother me if they just changed the logo and still called it Twitter, because I think that's basically how I look at it now. But it's just one of those things that bother. It's one of those things that bothers me on paper, but I guess it's probably the weakest example on this list. And last up is the Dark Ages Carolina Hurricanes. I thought of this when I was doing this breakdown, and it came into my mind late. And it's hard for me to put one of my favorite teams on this list, but God knows there's no excuse for looking like this. Not when you have this cool logo and these colors and everything else, and they can get it right. And they've done a lot of, different generations of jerseys since then. And they've messed with a lot of things. And I think the dog is trying to tunnel through her bed over here. You digging to China? What are you doing? Hey, what are you doing? Dog's trying to dig to China through my second floor apartment. I don't think the neighbors are going to like that, sweetie. So she's up past her bedtime. She's like excited that Dad's still up doing something. So come here. You want to say hi to everybody? Come here. Say hi. Say hi. Hi. No more digging to China tonight, please. Thank you. Love that dog. She literally, you can't see it. She's literally got her head resting on my knee the entire time I do this. So it's very hard if I decide to get very animated and move around that the dog is just right here and she gets all worked up and starts trying to dig. It's funny. She'll do it only on that bed for whatever reason. But the Hurricanes, there's just no excuse. Never again. I don't want to look at it. I don't want to see it. I've tried to black it out of my memory forever, and it was brought back up by a couple of my friends tonight talking about the clinching of the postseason. Awful. Never again. So there you go. That is the end of my worst rebrandings list. If you've got your own, I'm missing a bunch. I know I am. These are just what came to my mind, the first 10 that really came to my mind. We've got one other topic I wanted to cover before we get into what's got my attention this week. And before we get to that topic, I want to bring up something that's kind of interesting. You know, we talk about we live in wild times with all the different things that go on in the world and go on amongst the culture and people and all these different things. Well, restaurants are taking an interesting tack to how the world works in 2026 because a couple of restaurants are trying to improve society, so to speak. And I found it interesting. Ruth Chris Steakhouse decided to install a dress code to try to, class up the joint a little bit. We started to see airports, I think, do this as well. A couple of even campaigned, don't wear your PJs to the airport. And I'll be honest with you, I dress in a t-shirt to do this show. I am very comfortable in a t-shirt and jeans and a ball cap kind of look. But I admit, the older I get, I do want certain institutions to care. Like if I do this show and I just came home from working like 5-6 hours after work to do another job, and I'm out there making stuff and helping people and doing other things and broadcasting things, I may not look like $1 million. I may never look like $1 million. You may think I'm the ugliest son of a bitch to ever live. I don't know. I don't think I am, but I ain't. I'm not one of the Hemsworths or something like that either. So I what I'm getting at is I don't mind if a private business wants to, have a set group of standards. I don't think everybody has to look like they just came from the bar. If you want to look like you want to go to the bar and you do what you want to do, fine. Some bars don't even let you in with without a collared shirt. Some bars don't like hats. I mean, I think some things are obnoxious, but again, like an upper scale steakhouse, it's interesting to just see how things change over time because when I was younger, even some of these other steakhouse chains I thought were nicer meals and you had to kind of look a certain way for. And over time there's a gradual regression in those areas. And I admit, if I want to wear a Def Jam Records t-shirt in my own home, that's fine. And if I want to hang out with my friends with it on or whatever, or wear one of my favorite bar t-shirts or wear a WBC baseball shirt or something like that, I can do that. But I also know that there's standards and there are things and there's just places to look right. When I go to work, I'm not going to be wearing I'm not going to be turning around and I'm not going to have my, shirt sleeves rolled up and I'm not going to look like an absolute and utter goober. I'm not going to do that. And vice versa. I think ultimately to enjoy the things you want to do, sometimes you just need somebody to be an adult and be like, okay, don't do it here. I don't care what you do there, but maybe don't do it here. And then on the other side of things, you have Chick-fil-A rolling out a very interesting thing. And this thing, I actually do love this concept on paper. Now, I'm sure there's somebody in the comment section who's like, I can't agree to do this. And it's like, nobody's making you. That's the first thing. Before I go any further, nobody's making you do this. This is an option. And it's something interesting. Chick-fil-A is offering free ice cream to families if they will put their phones away, turn them in to one of those, I guess they have like a little phone cubby thing. Sometimes you see concerts and comedy shows do this now where they put a phone up for you for a little period of time. And if you can put your phone away for the entirety of a meal and come back up at the end and say, we're done and we'd like our phone back, you'll get free ice cream from Chick-fil-A. And on paper, you're like, why does Chick-fil-A care? I mean, Chick-fil-A has one of the most protected brands, one of the most protected, uniform attitudes to how they run their business. And they are extremely successful because of it. But at the same time, I don't see any problem with them wanting to see a little bit more of people and families interacting because there was a time, ladies and gentlemen, there was a time before this. And I'm in my 20s. I'm in my mid-20s. mid to late 20s, whatever the hell 27 is. I remember a time before, and I know the time, and I've lived in the time after. And I don't think this thing has to be surgically grafted to my hand at all hours of the day. It's not. I definitely know I'm under the, phone usage rating for a lot of people in the modern age. The problem is I leave it on to go to sleep at night for the sound or whatever, if I put on an old radio show or something just to fall asleep to, and then it'll just run for hours. And then I wake up the next morning, I'm like, whoa, you've been using your phone for 7 hours. I'm like, damn. Okay, well, that's kind of stacking the numbers against me. But I think this is a really neat gesture, and I think it's something that if people want to do it, I think this should be encouraged if you want to do that. I think one of the things we can do as a society to help understand and help be better to each other and our own families is to take some time away to disengage. And I get it. It's hard because the world is done. The business of the world, all this stuff is done through these screens and whatnot. And I'm doing this show through a screen, wanting people to watch that. But there has to be more to life than that. And I think it's important to remember that. And I get Chick-fil-A wants to be a part of that change, and by all means. And I like free ice cream. And if I went through there, I could see myself trying to entertain that thought. And I get it. Some moms and dads are going, well, you just don't understand because you're 27 years old and you don't have responsibilities and family members and loved ones and that. I'm like, I get it. Nobody's forcing you to do it. We're not putting a gun to your head and said, put the phone in the thing or you won't get ice cream. We're not doing that. I need that clipped. I'm going to clip that. Just the visual of me saying we're going to put a gun to somebody's head if they won't put their phone away during a meal at Chick-fil-A. First of all, it's a fast meal. If you're eating at Chick-fil-A, 9 times out of 10, you got to go. And if you don't, and if you have the time, put the damn phone down and have have a conversation. See how Johnny's doing in class. I mean, I don't know. Ask Sarah Beth about her Girl Scout troop. I don't know. Do something. I don't have to look at this thing, and honestly, notifications really do piss me off. I keep this thing on buzz most of the day because the tones just drive me crazy. And my father's the worst at it. My dad has more beeping tones going off on his phone. And when I get like a work email tone, it's right up there with the sound of an alarm, one of those standardized Apple alarms. It makes me want to vomit. I mean, it's a sickening sound. And it elicits that reaction in my brain. So I keep mine on vibrate a lot of times. And I feel it because it's in my pocket or it's in my hand or it's on the desk and it goes, and I'm like, all right, I know something's happening. But I think it's interesting that restaurants are trying to harbor change amongst us, trying to improve society. Will anybody listen? Only time will tell. And for the last segment of the week, you know what time it is. It's what's got my attention this week. This one, kind of interesting. There's a couple candidates in here. I did watch the Fukushima nuclear nightmare documentary on HBO. I thought that was going to be this topic, and I'll save that for a later discussion on next week's show. I did actually enjoy it. I did think it was a commendable story to hear about the plant workers that stayed behind at Fukushima Daiichi to help maintain and, save the people of Fukushima from a far greater disaster than it would have been if they weren't there actively working around the clock with firefighters and a bunch of other people trying to put out just an untenable situation on the back of a natural disaster, the likes of which Japan had never seen, really. A magnitude 9 earthquake creating a tsunami and I remember it was 2011. I don't fully think I understood or grasped at the time just how severe that issue was with all the devastation that tsunami created. But I do remember vaguely knowing about the story, and as somebody who's obsessed with the, nuclear power and the proliferation of more plants and wanting more of use of it in the future, you always go back and you learn the history of the examples that keep people in the public kind of leery about it. But when you think about it, the success to major catastrophe record for the nuclear industry is a lot more pleasant than a lot of other forms of, chemical, plants or coal or one of these other, oil plant. I mean, there's all these different things. But when you really break down the major incidents in the nuclear industry are just really very few across years and years of, sustainable energy that's being built around in plants all over the country. And it's one of those things I'd like to see, and I've made that comment before. But I didn't do that topic. What I did do is I am an unabashed fan of the Beatles. One of those things that I didn't appreciate enough when I was younger. But in my 20s, it clicked. From being taking my own guitar playing and musicianship more seriously in my 20s to exploring some other untapped areas of fandom and music and just taking a deeper dive in, the genres that I love so much more in the last 5 years of my life. And the Beatles, and particularly the solo careers of the Beatles, is one of those things that's really intrigued me. And the entire mythos and legacy of the Beatles, as a fan of Kiss and a fan of all these other big high-level concepts where there's so many layers and so many things you can read into, the Beatles are one of the richest veins of like pop culture history to dive into. And for somebody who's a nerd for this stuff like me, the Beatles are a never-ending well of that stuff. And over the last couple of years, I've got to go and explore Beatles historical sites in London. I've dug deeper into all the solo catalogs between the four members, and watching Anthology earlier or late last year, right before I went to London. It was awesome. It was so cool. It was such a great time to coincide with it all. But I've really done a lot of love and digging into the solo discographies of each of the four Beatles. And one of the shows we've got rolling out this summer is going to be our records album review podcast that we're going to do, taking a look at some of my favorite records from my collection, digging deeper, not just doing some of the obvious choices, but some of the other ones, because I love vinyl, I love collecting it, and there's nothing better to me than putting on a record and appreciating it, because the beauty of records over anything else, even your Spotify or Apple playlist, is when you buy a record, you better enjoy the whole damn record, because if you're going to play it, you can't just skip it. Now, I know there are people that can tell you how to do that, but I ain't scratching a record, and I'm not messing mine up to do that. So when you put on a record, you're getting the whole package, and it's one of the best parts about it. It's made me appreciate so many more albums for the entirety of it. You're not just putting on an album for 2 tracks and then switching. That's not how it works. But one of those topics, and a spoiler alert for at some point down the road when we unveil that episode to the world, it will be the John Lennon solo album, the Plastic Ono Band, his first post-Beatles solo album properly, and not released in the end of 1970. And what brought me to what the actual answer to what's got my attention this week is there are 2 interviews. And the beauty of John Lennon's life is, even as tragically short as it is, it's so incredibly well documented that if anybody from the ages of 5 to 52 to 502 can go back and look and really get a great understanding of the entire picture of John Lennon, because some people only see the activist John of the 70s with his avant-garde interest, or the mop-top Beatle look of the early 60s, or the psychedelic John Lennon of the late 60s, or the putting his life back together after being a father in music, after raising Sean Lennon for 5 years, getting back into music and having it being cut tragically short by his murder in 1980. One of the things that I love to do is I like to understand the whole person, because I think it's so easy for fans to fixate on one particular part. And what makes John Lennon so interesting to me is he changes so much in a 40-year period. Like, there's his life before we know him as a Beatle. There's his life as a Beatle. There's the beginning years of his, solo career away from the Beatles. There's that period of time where he takes a step back. He has that Lost Weekend split with Yoko Ono for a couple years there. Then he comes back and he wants to have a family and raise a son after he really wasn't there in the beginning for Julian Lennon. And he tried to rectify that to some degree toward the end of his life. And Julian started to be a part of his life more. And, he's raised Sean the way, selfishly, I think Julian probably wishes he had, but it was just a different period of time. And I think John had matured as a bit more as somebody who could raise a child in that position. He became the house dad. He quit music, and then he picked it back up. If you want to break it down if you want to understand the man himself, there are taped interviews with him that really do serve as like almost proto podcasts in a way. They served as these, documents for journalists to write these stories on, or recorded for radio segments to play. And I think what's got my attention this week is there are two specific interviews that I've spent a lot of time with. There is the classic famous 1970 Rolling Stone interview with Jan Wenner, that where John just, he basically motherfucks everybody to do with everything. Like he goes after a lot of people that were with the Beatles that he claimed were hanging on to the Beatles, that claimed that they made the Beatles that didn't. He picks fights with some of the members of the Beatles in that interview. He disparages his own musical catalog with the Beatles in some regards. There's just it's kind of an angsty period for John. He's moving out of this lifestyle in this period that brought him, global superstardom. And now he's ready to do something else. He's graduated in his mind from the Beatles, and he wants nothing to do with it. And then you get to the interview recorded just a day or two before he was ultimately murdered in New York City in 1980. And what you get to see in that interview, and I will actually link the interview that I'm referencing in the video below. I believe it was done with a British radio broadcast. It was recorded in New York City, and I believe they were still working on Double Fantasy at the time. And, we're going in and out of the studio working on that. And there were several series of interviews that came out around that same time in that couple days span before he was ultimately murdered. And this interview is just so revealing because Yoko's in there with him. You can see John kind of take a more jubilant, kind of excited, kind of energetic vibe. And I think you see somebody that recognized that he was in a different period of his life, and he could look back. If you looked at it back now, and sometimes they even ask him about, like, how do you sleep, the song, that the diss track directed at Paul McCartney, and some other things, and you just see John in a different headspace, not really rocking the boat anymore, willing to be, reflective, taking things in stride, taking his own, persona and his own celebrity in stride. Like, everybody came to him thinking of him some, like, man with all the answers. And he's just like, I'm a human being. I'm a guy. I've made mistakes in life. I've been, so many different people. I had these traumas happen to me, but I think I'm in a better place now. And you just see, and that's what makes his end so tragic. You see a guy who was really, I think, really happy in life at the time, and it's just taken from him. And that's the worst kind of tragedies you see, when somebody, has everything going in the right direction for him and has something that is just ultimately taken, and it like that. And nothing will ever replace a figure as influential as that, or any of the Beatles like that, because they are the most significant pop cultural movement that has ever sprouted up in the history of, youth and pop culture. Really. There's a time before the Beatles and there's a time after. And that interview is so revealing to me, and it's so interesting. And I think it gives you a really good understanding of the whole picture of John Lennon. But there you go. That's going to wrap up our podcast this week. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Enjoy the Final Four this weekend and get out, enjoy the weather. I know if you're in the Carolinas here, the weather is starting to pick up. The Hornets are back in the postseason again. A lot of good things going on locally here. Everybody have a safe and happy Easter weekend. Enjoy whatever the Easter Bunny brings you, if he brings you anything. If you find the eggs around the house, remember, shake them, make sure there's not money or chocolate in them before you throw them around the backyard or whatever you're doing. But please, everybody have a great holiday. We'll be back next week. So thank you guys so much for tuning in to another edition of the Collins Janus Show. The preceding episode was a production of Moonlight Media Works.